Hey guys and gals, it's your buddy Drew with Living History's Mysteries. You know, ever since our inception on the platform, we have looked into historic mysteries, legend, myth, trying to answer those questions, trying to find an answer to those mysteries that history left behind. One of the most popular subjects we have hit on this channel are the Northmen, the Norse, the Vikings. What if I told you that every Viking was Norse, but not every Norseman was Viking? One of the most fascinating realms of this magnificent culture was their weapons and their fighting techniques. And today we are going to look at an interview that was conducted with Dr. William Short and his partner, Reynard Óskarson, about the Viking hand fighting techniques. They call it martial arts. Maybe not in the sense that we're familiar with growing up or looking at Bruce Lee films and Kung Fu magazine and things like that, but an amazing hand fighting technique and amazing weapons. But once again, the unanswered question: how did they utilize their mind, their body, their weapons into these fighting techniques? Check this out. This has got some answers you didn't expect.
Viking martial arts. There is a ton of media and research out there depicting how the Viking actually engaged in combat, but how much of it is accurate? We have two very special guests joining us, Dr. William Short and Reynard Óskarson. Together, they represent the organization Hurstwic, as well as co-authored the book Men of Terror, a comprehensive analysis of Viking combat. Now, these guys have done some serious research, and they're going to challenge everything you knew about the Vikings. And today, they're going to share what they uncovered in a decades-long research project and tell us a little bit more about the real Viking martial arts. So I'd like to start off, first of all, by thanking you gentlemen so much for taking your time to join us in this chat and share your research with us about Viking combat. And, we're going to get to more into details of the actual combat itself. But first, I'd like to start from the beginning. Can you tell us what Hurstwic is and what is the goal of the organization?
Hurstwic is an organization that researches Viking combat. We're interested in all things Viking, but our main focus is Viking combat. We're trying to understand as deeply and as carefully as possible how it was that Vikings fought. I really have no martial arts background. My background is technical, and I worked in a job where I was working on audio, acoustics, human hearing. And I read these things called sagas, these stories set in Viking Age Iceland. And I read one and liked it, read a few more, really liked it, and decided to learn more by taking a summer course at the University of Iceland. That was 25 years ago. When I got back, I really wanted to do more. And I found this group called Hurstwic that was starting to just get formed. And they put me in charge of the weapons training because they just had a very serious injury, and I wanted to make sure they didn't do that. And so no one was really doing this kind of research that long ago. There was really nothing. But I did find a local museum, the Higgins Armory Museum, that had quite an extensive medieval and Renaissance collection of arms and armor. And they were just starting a group that was basically doing HEMA research, historical European martial arts, so based on some of the manuals. And I thought that was at least a starting point. And that's really where Hurstwic started. Eventually we separated, we got our own training room, and the focus has really been on Viking weapons and Viking combat.
Now I'll add a little bit to it. So first the question of what is Hurstwic? We are just really peculiar super nerds. We're really interested in some strange science. What was it, about 12, 13 years ago? I met William by mere chance. I had no interest in Vikings at all. And he poisoned me, polluted my brain, and somehow it took over. I was a martial artist before, but Vikings just, it became too fascinating to research it. Yeah, I just turned into a nerd. I probably was never cool, but I turned into a nerd.
Now, you mentioned that you were a martial artist prior. What arts did you study, and how did that affect your perspective going into this project?
I dabbled in many things, but my main focus was Taekwondo, Jeet Kune Do, and I played a little bit with mixed martial arts as well. And what I saw especially was so I came from traditional background and into something else. It started with the Jeet Kune Do, where it really broke the pattern of how you should think. Somewhat different than the traditional martial arts, as in they had a goal, and their method was just to attain their goal, now in their own way. And then I went to mixed martial arts as well, nothing serious or important, but they had a different goal, and they tried to attain that goal differently. So they broke the pattern of how you should do things. And that's what I would say I brought to the table of Hurstwic. Studying medieval martial arts, specifically Viking combat, had been a path that many had gone before me, but I had no connection with it. I just saw, okay, that's the goal. How do we attain that goal? And William was a scientist, so I thought, no, we'll use your scientific background. We don't need to go a path that somebody else has gone.
Are there any other key players in the organization that we should know about?
Yeah, certainly we have a range of instructors in our organization who have reached some level of competency in this, not only in the combat arts, but also in terms of the research and what they have accomplished.
So when we got this core group, they had specialities that were immensely important to us. So one of them was a special forces soldier, so he could tell us, this is not how combat is done, or this is the difference between modern combat, what I would do, and what Vikings would do. And we hit that point very often. It doesn't matter what we would do, because we have to figure out what they would do. And that is totally different. And I have a prop next to me. I hope you can see it. So this one here, for example, it's an axe that we made specifically for our research purpose. We wanted an axe that we could hit with and would leave impact but no bones broken, and we could hook with as well. So it's made from whatever material our maker, Barbara Vector, made it from. But she made it specifically so we could do research, and we had to invent a lot of training tools and apparatus to do our research. Mm-hmm. We are super nerds, Dan. I assume that comes clear.
Yeah. Oh, that is awesome. That's even better. And I definitely want to get back to the weapons because there's a whole fascinating aspect to that, how you guys approach that. But one thing I want to ask right now is, when you started this project, what led you believe that there was aspects to Viking martial arts that hadn't already been established?
When I met William, 13, 14 years ago, I attended one of his lectures. Again, not interested in Vikings at all. And I thought, this doesn't make sense. So I live in Iceland. This is the place where the stories were kept, where the culture was kept. Not that it wasn't kept in Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and so on, but it was just intently kept here. I've been hit in the nose before, so what I saw William do is I thought, oh, everybody has planned till they're hit in the nose. And that's sort of what I saw William was doing at that time, so I questioned it.
Yeah, Reynard brought reality to what we were doing. I mean, up until that point, it was mostly book learning with some, and correct me if I'm wrong, but mostly book learning with time spent in the training room. But none of us had been, basically punched in the nose. So Rayner brought that level of seriousness and experience with other arts to what Hurstwic was doing, and brought us up to a whole new level in our research and a whole new level in our training.
Can you tell us what the I-33 manuscript is?
Sure, it's the Royal Armoury's I-33 manuscript. It's thought to have been written in what is now the northern parts of Germany in around the 12th century, 13th century, I think, early 13th century. And it covers using sword and buckler. And many people believe that it's a good basis for doing Viking sword and shield. Pretty quickly, Dan, we had to drop that because the weapons really are so different. A buckler is nothing remotely not like a shield. And that really got confirmed for us by a passage in Eastlandinga Saga, one of the Surtlinga sagas that are contemporary histories. And the author of that saga actually participated in a lot of the fights he describes. And he writes about swords and bucklers being used in the same fight in Iceland in that time, which was 13th century. And he clearly describes a buckler being used the way a buckler is used, and he clearly describes a shield being used in the way that a Viking shield would be used. So at least at that point, they understood the differences between the two weapons and understood that they were used very, very differently. So with that backing up our practical tests in our training room, we really had to discard using not only I-33, but pretty much all the manuals. They are all much too late to be very useful to us.
As we did our research, we found out that there are 3 pillars to understanding Viking combat. And one of those pillars is mindset, and that goes for every fighting system. And I will give you an analogy from medieval Japan. If I took two warriors, a ninja and a samurai, and I asked them to fight to the death, noon tomorrow, high noon. The clothes, we'll put new clothes on, and you'll receive a weapon you've never seen before. So I give them a Tommy gun and a 3-piece suit. At noon, the day after, I can sort of guarantee you the samurai will be standing really proud and tall on a hill, stating his clan, issuing the challenge, while the ninja would just rat-tat-tat-tat in the back of his head. So that is the mindset, and mindset dictates behavior. So we had to dig really deep into the mindset. We use a concept called, we coined narrow sources. So narrow sources means the source must be about Vikings. The manuals might be really good for many, many things, but to us, they're not about Vikings.
So, and I saw on your site that you mentioned that you had to take the stance of separating contemporary martial arts ideals and mindsets and combat styles from what would the historical sources would be. How did you go about making that division between the two?
When William dragged me into the organization, I was super scared because I could see that William really was a genius. He really knew what he was talking about. Super clever human being. I was just really scared that anything I would put to the table would be polluted. Strikes like something from a Japanese art, or suddenly they would be doing spin kicks from Taekwondo or who knows what. It's really easy to pollute it, really easy. We agreed. Instead of using some martial arts, I would use maybe training methodology or testing methodology from martial arts. But any technical aspect or movement aspect or something, we would refrain from. When we were doing our simulated combat, we saw opportunities to give a punch or a headbutt or a knee. Really luckily, we asked the question, did Vikings hit? Did they punch? Did they headbutt? Did they knee? And the really short answer is no, they didn't. What makes most sense to me has no relevance to what makes most sense to Vikings. And that comes back to the mindset. If you understand the mindset, then you can start to see how they thought.
And that's a perfect segue into your sparring experiments. I really enjoyed reading about the different stages of sparring that you guys do and how you consider that the laboratory for this project. So can you tell us a little bit how you guys approach sparring and how that plays into your research of how the Vikings combated?
we call it dynamic combat simulation or force on force simulation. Now there is a big problem. What we are researching is sharp blade combat, and we really need to respect that that's what we're testing and researching. So our approach to the simulations was to understand that there's a missing part and try to make a holistic picture by doing it in many different ways. So we would use super light weapons, because then you would get the sort of the correct biomechanics, and they could punish you so hard that you don't like to be hit that hard. But then we would use steel weapons, and when you have a two-handed steel axe, you will have to pull back. You will have to pull back on strike. Otherwise, either I'm trying to injure you, or you will be wearing so much protection that we're going back to, this is not how a strike was done, because you're wearing so much protection. It would not have the same effect on you. It changes the dynamics. A shield against a blunt weapon usually doesn't break. So we created fake shields that would break to a blunt weapon, so we could get the same dynamics in the fight. So we had to just, when there was a part missing, we tried to add it in by changing some element in the simulation itself. Yeah, to answer the question, we just had to do crazy many things and crazy different things using the scientific method, which means we try to falsify our theory. We say, didn't Vikings do this? And then we try to falsify it. And we do that by having massive amount of different tools.
Maybe one of Hurstwic's great strengths is our ability to improvise on that and create training weapons. If we want to do an experiment and we don't have a training weapon that seems like it's going to be safe, that seems like it's going to replicate something that the Vikings used, and seems to have the right capabilities, not only offensive capabilities, but also defensive capabilities. So it's going to react in many of the same ways. If we don't have that weapon, we'll try to make something. So Barbara's axes are the perfect example of that. We needed an axe that we could hit with and not break bones or kill people. And Barbara came up with something that was really clever, and it has that necessary defensive element of actually being able to hook, a use of the axe that Vikings took advantage of. Hooking people, hooking shields, hooking other things. But one of my favorite exercises that we did with these sorts of improvised weapons, sometimes weapons break during a fight. And so I rigged up a whole bunch of weapons which, unknown to the participants in that day's training, would break very easily. So they thought they were just normal weapons, but they were rigged so that they would break. And it was funny, one person's spear broke in the middle of a round, and it took them a minute before they realized they had only half a spear left. Because people get so excited, so into the fight.
So how did these sparring, tell us about how these sparring sessions progressed from just being indoor in the laboratory and actually outside into the weather and the elements of different terrains. How did that add more dimension to your research?
Outdoor simulations, they gave us new view because we could test new scenarios. And we could test an ambush, hiding if needed to, ideas about the footwork. Most often combat training is trained indoors on an even floor. And outdoors, that doesn't happen very often, if you at least in the Viking Age. But we had the basic sort of down, how they fought. So this would be just a slight adaptation.
And I will add an example of that. One of the environmental situations that we set up to spar on was on board a Viking ship. And I remember, I didn't think it would matter that much, but wow, what a difference, the rocking deck of a ship. And combine that with all the stuff that is on the deck of a ship that gets in the way of a fight, really changed the dynamics of the fight and opened our eyes to how complex that could be.
Fascinating. I love the authenticity to your approach, because it's more than just reading a few passages, reading some textbooks, and coming up with a theory. You guys are actually out there testing and being as authentic as possible. And Reynard, I know you told me about something about you guys were the first people in 700 years to make iron actually out in the elements. Could you tell us about that and how that changed history?
Yeah, Dan, we're interested in everything related to Vikings, not just combat. And one thing that fascinated us is the iron. How iron was made in Viking Age Scandinavia, people have been studying that. That's pretty clear. But what was really interesting was how was iron made in Viking Age Iceland? And I think Reynard can confirm this, but for decades, if not longer, Everyone has believed that the iron made in Viking Age Iceland was just utter crap, that swords made out of this stuff would bend during a fight, and you'd have to straighten it out underfoot, and that's something that appears in the sagas a couple of times. And so the general belief was that this stuff was just rubbish. But then, I don't know, a few years ago, I was visiting some friends in Iceland, and we visited this site, and there were these mountains of iron slag there from the Viking Age. And I looked at the archaeological report, and this farm made something like 1,000 tons of iron in the Viking Age. I mean, that's way more than the farm needs, way more than the district needs, way more than that quarter of Iceland needs. What were they doing making all that iron if it was really crap? And that was only one of multiple sites that made lots of iron in Viking Age Iceland. So we were curious, what was the quality of Viking Age iron in Iceland? So we decided to start a research experiment to find out. And we brought in a whole bunch of experts, like geologists that could tell us about the raw materials available in Iceland. And we needed high temperature experts who could tell us about the necessary materials for making the furnace where the smelting takes place. And we had wood experts and the Forestry Service of Iceland helping us out, and probably others that I can't even remember at this point. And we put it all together. We did this research. We tried to use the scientific method to understand it. And we did a whole lot of smelts here in the United States, basically to get the fundamentals so that we understood the basics. And then we went to Iceland. We had a festival. We used all Icelandic materials and made good quality iron, and we think it was probably the first iron made in Iceland in many centuries, probably 700 years. And importantly, the thing that broke everyone's mind was this wasn't just good iron, this was excellent iron. This iron was more than adequate for pretty much any tool, any weapon that you might want to make. It was first quality iron. And so we sort of rewrote history by doing this experiment.
I often hear Glima associated with Viking combat. How much does that actually play into your research, and how authentic is that to their method of fighting?
So first of all, then be super careful of the internet. There is so much rubbish nonsense about Glima flying around everywhere. Either check what we have done, which has been recognized by the Glima Association of Iceland, the only authority on Glima, or go directly to them, glima.is. We started taking our results together and put them in a book form. I wanted all the highest authorities to check them out, to falsify them, to tell us, no, this is wrong. So one of the authorities I went to is the Glima Association of Iceland. And Glima, just for your audience, if they don't know, Glima is the wrestling method of Vikings, and the empty-handed combat method of Vikings, and today is the national sport of Iceland. And we have an association of Glima here in Iceland. So I went to their president, and I just fell in love with it. There is a direct lineage from the Viking Age till the day today. There is evolution, there is changes, but there is a direct lineage, and it had immense influence. Because it is a direct lineage, and we can train it today, and we can speak to the people, and so it's a living, combative activity of Vikings. So if you understand the Glima of today, you can walk down the path all the way to the Glima of the past. And if you understand the Glima of the past and the Glima of the day, then it's really easy to look at, let's say, a sword strike, and say, no, this does not fit into this holistic picture. Because I think in every single culture, armed combat and unarmed combat go hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you shared some photos with me. You were doing some grappling on ice. I love, again, another aspect that a lot of people probably don't think about, but what was that experience like, and how did that add to your research?
We do research, and we admit to being super nerds in Viking combat. And that means we have to do many scary, scary things. Like, where you think, what the hell is going to happen now? Is something going to break, or am I going to drown? This was one of those experiments. So we entered a ice rink with wrestling shoes on, and they are in some ways very similar to Viking shoes. And we did Glima. I took one of the best Glima fighters in Iceland, and just had them try to kill me gently. And I'm still alive today. I don't know how, but it is super scary. And we know that, and I did this because, again, everything must fit. There must be a holistic image. So sword strike must fit with the glima. The glima must fit with the mindset. Now, if we find out that they did glima on ice, and that does not fit with the glima we know, then we know something is off. So that's why we had to do it, because we know in the Viking age they did glima on ice, and I think the last source I have found of doing glima on ice is 1900s. But we have done scary things before, and it doesn't make me any more manly or courageous, just makes me scared every single time.
So this holistic approach you're talking about, this holistic image of the way they would have fought in authentic combat, there was a quote on the website where you mentioned that you wanted people to be able to look outside through a window into the room and see you guys wrestling and forget about the weapons or forget about the costumes you're wearing and look at it and go, okay, yes, that's Viking combat. What did you find in your research that makes that kind of distinction? How was Viking combat different from other types of martial arts?
If you looked in the window and saw two people, I don't know, dressed in Boy Scout uniforms hitting each other with a stick, you would know they were Viking fighters because of the way that they were moving, the way that they were using those tools. And that's what we're trying to do in our training room. And it has to do with the mindset. And I think it's the third pillar that we're talking about, that it's all power-based. It's a power-based activity. And the goal of a Viking fight is simply split into whatever is in front of you. And so if they are doing something that involves a tap or a jab or some low power attack, we're probably going to say, no, that's probably not how Vikings would have done it, because everything points to this power-based attack.
Yeah. I'll give you a little bit more of the same point of view, and I won't go real deep into it. There are three pillars of understanding Viking combat. One is glima, and glima is a power-based system. It is about who is the strongest, that you take down your opponent. And in Icelandic, we still have in common phrases, brjóta menn á bak aftur, láta kné fylgja kviði. That means you throw him down and you take a superior ground position to finish him off. It is just get it down, finish it. Then we have the idea of the mindset, and that's a little bit complex, so I'll give you just the short version. That is about two things. It's about, number one is about orðstír, and orðstír means word glory. It means that your name is spoken after your death. It is the eternal life. How do you get that word glory? You do that by being a drengur. And a drengur is not easily translatable a word. It means it is sort of trust-infused honor. And the third pillar is adaptability and improvisational skills, like in the use of rocks. Use what you have. So the idea is you take down what is in front of you with brute power. Just cleave it in two, and that makes sense because then people will talk about you. But when Dan slew the ogre William and this evil bastard Reynard, he cut them in two, and then he broke William's back. People will talk, and that's what was the key, important. Then you must be a man who is to be trusted. So you don't do anything underhanded. You don't sort of assassinate me or anything like that. So there's a difference between killing and murdering in Viking mindset. Killing someone, that is okay. You're ready to take the consequences. You killed someone and claim the kill. Murdering someone means you did it in secret, you didn't tell anybody, and that is the lowest of the low.
So you partially answered my question with this, because I was going to ask another question. I was looking at some of your research about that heavy chopping blow with the axe, these heavy axes, and looking at the photos of the Viking with the axe up in the air coming down for that swing. What I couldn't help notice was how vulnerable they looked in that moment. So when they were doing those kind of maneuvers, did they have any specific defensive tactics to kind of protect themselves, or was it all risk be damned, or were these more just finishing moves? Did they not even care about the defensive side of that?
You have to look at it from a different eye than the eye of a typical martial artist today, who knows, like, this is first happening, then this, and you need to be prepared for this. Are they vulnerable? Yeah, it's a big axe, but our research also says that it is a meteor. It takes away anything that goes in front of it. So the psychological element of what the hell is happening with this big blade coming at me. It's not like, yeah, I'm tactical thinking, because here in our Zoom meeting, we can assume many things. Yeah, I would do this and this and this. But when a two-handed axe is coming at you at full speed, if your pants are clean, I mean, that's good enough. You die an honorable death.
And the other thing that I would add to that is, I saw that picture, and I think I know which picture you're talking about, and there's quite some distance between them. So Mike has all the advantage of range against Barbara's sword and shield. And Barbara can put her shield up, but the axe is going to go right through that, right through her helmet and right through her head. We've done those tests.
What about any empty-hand fight, like striking arts, punches, kicks? Did they have anything distinctive about the way they fought empty-handed?
Our sources all point to they did not strike. If they struck, then it was in anger or out of control situations. And my theory was, why didn't they strike? The bones of the hands are fragile, and this is a weapon-based system. So you can imagine if you have to use your handgun day in and day out, or you have to always be prepared to use it, even though you don't use it day in and out, and then you break your hand. Then things are not as easy. This is your safety of life. So that was my theory, at least, and that's only a theory because I see nothing about it. But I see they didn't punch really. About their fighting style was mostly just power based in get a grip around the lower back of the opponent, and then you continue on from there. You might sweep his leg, you might break his back, you might lift him up and crash him down, and from there they would, if that didn't do the job, and if this was combat, because they had sportive glima and they had combative glima, and they are nearly identical apart from the intensity of the throw itself and the follow-up, which is this superior ground fighting position. And please remember, this is like caveman Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like it was a brutish, power-based, honor-based system about eternal life, that people want to talk to you forever because you are a warrior.
What was the role of the knife, and why did the Vikings consider themselves unarmed even when they had one?
I'll try to answer that. We don't think that they considered the knife to be a weapon. I mean, that was sort of the last resort. Everyone carried a knife on their belt all the time or around their neck. And if you truly had nothing else, the knife would have to do as the weapon. Or it might be the finishing weapon once you had the superior ground position. But the typical weapons would be, sword, axe, spear, sax, things like that. And the knife would just be your everyday tool. So a tool more than a weapon.
My theory is that weapons had single purpose. So you have the axe, the normal everyday wood axe or axe for whatever. That makes a wedge shape like this. So if you stick it into a wood, you can pull it back out. As an example of a tool axe. The weapon axe was really thin, and if you cut wood with it, it would just get stuck. But if you cut a limb with it, it was perfect. So I think the knife was a multi-purpose tool, but I think the weapons were pure weapons.
So at this point, all your research has led to you guys releasing your new book, Men of Terror. What are some interesting things that readers can expect to learn about in this book?
What was most interesting to me and where things sort of fell into place and started really making sense is when we came to this realization of these three pillars that define Viking combat. And once someone has an understanding of what those three pillars are, how they combine, and what it all means, then the general concept of what Viking combat is all about really falls into place and makes a lot more sense. The other aspect that's in the book is there's just this really wide and deep scientific research going on. So the book has not only got the photographs of the weapons, photographs of some of the moves, but a lot of scientific data. So graphs and plots of some of our tests that help support some of our ideas about how the fighting was conducted.
Did you encounter any resistance at all from the academic community when you started this project, and any pushback towards what people thought they knew about Vikings?
Yeah, Dan, yes and no. So the no part first. First of all, it seems like a lot of what we do is somewhat under the radar in the academic field. And yes, we get a lot of pushback once people are aware of what we're doing, which I think Reynard can probably talk about much better than I can.
As you, I assume, know, in the martial arts circle, ego is rampant. But later on, I learned that a lot of the Viking world, especially it has just is more vibrant with eco than even the martial arts. So with the academics, no, they didn't pay much attention to us in the beginning and brushed us aside in the beginning. Now that has changed quite a lot, I must admit. And I respect that. I mean, we do not come from the academic field of Vikings, but still we are respected and accepted by many academics now. Now, those who don't know us, of course not. They assume that we just dress up and pretend to be Vikings.
So where is your research taking you now? What are your next steps in this project?
Dan, that could be the basis of another 1-hour chat. We have a lot of interesting projects on tap. I'll talk about one that's really got me fascinated, and it's pretty nerdy, and that has to do with the physics of Viking weapons. Truly understanding how it is that the warrior moves to move his weapon such that the weapon hits the target and delivers destructive energy. And we've started on that. Several phases are now well underway in that. So for instance, we've done motion capture of striking with Viking weapons to understand exactly how the warrior's body is moving and where the power is coming from and when it is being delivered and how it all comes together to that one point where weapon hits target and how much energy is put into the target. And we started doing like 3D scans of Viking weapons, so we have excellent models of these historical Viking weapons to use in our modeling. So it's still underway, it's still ongoing, but we're excited about where it may end up.
So if viewers were only going to take one idea and walk away with one idea from this video, what would you want that idea to be?
Yeah, the idea would probably be in all realms, be that in martial arts, be that in researching Vikings, be that in studying anything or interacting with a human being at all. There is no reason to do something just because somebody said so. You should look for falsifying, especially if you're learning, especially with the martial arts, and that is the school I come from. So that is the school I see that has influenced the martial art as well. That because the instructor told me, therefore. And you think, no, we use the falsifying process where we test it and so on and so forth. And you should, well, the data is here, or something of those lines.
And Dan, I come from a technical background, and the scientific method is ingrained into my whole being. And I think what we discovered is that science can be applied to any of this stuff, including Viking combat. And by applying science to our research in Viking combat, we can make startling breakthroughs, really understand this in ways that it has not been understood before. And so using the scientific method in places where you wouldn't think the scientific method would apply has been very valuable to us.
It just is too interesting and too much fun. I had no idea that martial arts could be so adventurous, where you can just test things in the most open way possible. Like I told you, doing glima on ice or jumping from the deep end of a swimming pool in a chairlift, checking if you can swim. It's just, it somehow brings the quickness to your heart.
Yeah, well, I personally had a blast reading through your website. Like when we first talked about it, I thought this was gonna be interesting, just get some concepts of the martial arts. But when I really saw the type of experiments you were doing and the lengths you were going to make it as authentic as possible, it opened up a lot of ideas that I never even thought to think. If that makes any sense, is that there's so much things to look at, and I just absolutely admire what you guys have done and the work you've put into it, and just like you said, falsifying everything, you're holding everything up to a standard, and then you're recreating a new standard and holding everything up to that. So I think that's extremely admirable. I think it's fantastic research. I cannot wait to see what you guys do next. This is fascinating.
Thank you, Dan.
So that was a peek into the world of Viking martial arts. I would like to thank William and Rainier today for their time and for sharing their passion and knowledge with us. Their book, Men of Terror, a comprehensive analysis of Viking combat, goes into much greater detail, and I highly recommend picking up a copy. It helps support the research, and you can find a link to the book down below in the description.
Welcome back. You know, it's like I said in the beginning. This has been a huge course of study for me, and I know several historians, weapons experts, culturalists have all been trying to separate fact from fiction, true stories from the sagas. Of course, you know the sagas of the Vikings. They go into detail on these elaborate conquests and stories and journeys. But they had a pretty good imagination. They would reference monsters or beasts in place of large, very formidable enemies. But the weapons and the way that they did conquer has always been a fascination. These gentlemen know their business. And as long as their organization is studying these techniques, these weapons, these styles of combat, I believe we're going to get a lot of those answers that we've been looking for. I hope you guys enjoyed this little look into Viking weapons and fighting styles. I did. For sure. You know, we're so used to seeing those weapons. You heard them mention a sax. This is a sax. Though it's a long sax, it's a sax nonetheless. Of course, we're all familiarized with the axe, the spear, the armor. But the fighting styles that they used with each of these, there's the true mystery. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. God bless you, God love you, we do. And we'll see you out there.